Welcome to this second tutorial on how to paint this Space Marine champion. In this video, I'll cover three main topics. First, I'll talk to you about complementary colors. Don't underestimate the color harmony and visual impact you can achieve with this type of contrast. Its simplicity is a virtue when choosing a color scheme for your miniatures. Next, I'm going to cover the topic of support. To prevent shaky hands and ensure precise strokes, it's crucial to support your hand in some way. It can be on the table, your other hand, or some kind of stand. This will make a big difference in your control and precision. Finally, I'll explore the technique of non-metallic metals. To make these look realistic and striking, they must never lose contrast. I'll look for all possible contrasts: saturation, light value, temperature, satin finish, among others. Without further ado, let's get started. For the purple base color, I will use Vallejo model color violet. For the golden details, I'll start with a base of Citadel's Morfang brown. Then, I'll add highlights with Averland sunset and ice yellow. For the brightest highlights, I'll use Ivory. I will also use Hexen Lichen and orange from Vallejo's Airline, along with Citadel's flash Gitz yellow, to apply filters and glazes to the midtones and shadows of the gold. I apply a base coat of violet over the purity seals and shoulder pads, making sure to cover well with a single pass. At this point, as you can see, I'm carefully painting the left shoulder pad. I'm not too worried about making it perfect on the first try. I'll have time to correct it later. Once this base coat is applied, I will add a bit of ivory to the violet to gradually lighten its tone. I continue applying the next layer without completely covering the previous one, and emphasizing the areas where the light hits more strongly. Since I already had the volume marked thanks to the white on the shoulder pads, I respect it and use it as a guide. I add a bit more ivory to the violet mixture to create a second highlight. At this point, I start to be more careful with my brush strokes. Notice how I use the tip of the brush in these small areas, as it allows me to have total control over what I'm doing and avoid having to make corrections later. This purple is a very easy color to work with, and since it's a small part of the figure, I finished it quickly. Now I'll continue with the golden details. I will start by applying a base coat of Citadel's Morfang brown, almost undiluted, on all the golden elements. I'll do it quickly but precisely to avoid staining other areas of the miniature. After painting the base coat for the gold, I realized that the white armor needs a bit more definition. To fix this, I'm going to separate all the armor plates by applying a dark color. The purple I used for the shoulder pads is perfect for this task. This process is really simple and satisfying to execute. Just dilute the color a bit and let yourself go. You'll see how the figure's details guide the brush, giving you confidence about where to apply the paint. Just make sure to do it slowly and that the brush has a good tip. After fixing this detail on the armor, I return to the golds, using Averland Sunset as the first highlight. I apply this paint undiluted. Although this color has good coverage, in some areas I will need to go over it to ensure complete coverage. My goal at this point is to create the volume of the golden parts, using the volumes I previously established in the white and violet as a guide. I use the tip of the brush like a pencil to draw the edges, contours, and textures of the gold. Many of these brush strokes will be partially covered by subsequent layers of paint, but not entirely, and the small percentage that remains visible will add information that enriches the figure. Remember that creating detail on the figure is the challenging part. Removing it is as simple as applying a flat layer of paint on top or adding a shadow with the airbrush. Now, to increase the light value, I mix a bit of ice yellow with Averland Sunset. I apply it again without completely covering the previous layer, allowing the layers to partially show through and enrich the texture of the gold. The golden metal we paint is a simplification of real gold. It's like a trick for the eye, making an object appear to shine when it's actually layers of opaque paint one over the other. However, this trick is very effective, and in person, non-metallic metals work perfectly to the observer's eye. Soon, I will upload a video explaining in detail how to paint non-metallic golds, with many reflections and different techniques to achieve much deeper and more interesting gold metals than what we usually see at these small scales. Watch how I rest my ring finger on the miniature to find balance and stability for these delicate and precise strokes. It's important to support your hands whenever you can. This detail can solve many of the issues with shaky hands. With these 3 layers of highlights, the golden color has its volume well defined. However, to give it a pronounced golden aura, I need to work on the midtones and seek more saturation. To do this, I will start using a glaze of Vallejo Model Air Orange. I will apply this glaze starting in the midtone and ending in the shadows of all the golden areas of the figure. This orange glaze will not only intensify the characteristic tone of the gold, but also add great saturation to the shadows, making the desaturated highlights stand out even more. This way, I achieve more depth in the gold, which is always beneficial for metals. Now, I apply a glaze of Flash Gitz yellow to all the light areas of the gold to achieve a natural shine in the metal. Later, I will recover the light highlights to emphasize the reflective qualities of the material. I add a lot of ivory to the mix and apply these highlights to the areas where the light would hit directly and with greater intensity. For example, on the most exposed edges and sharp corners, and on the highest points of curved surfaces like the shoulder pads. It's important to recover those final highlights when painting non-metallic metal as polished as this, because they are what really bring the metallic effect to life. The final highlights simulate the light reflections on a metallic surface, creating a marked contrast between the lights and shadows. This contrast is crucial to trick the eye and make the paint look like real metal. Without these highlights, the finish can appear flat and lifeless. Adding those final touches of light adds depth and realism, making non-metallic metals look truly impressive. Now I am going to prepare a glaze of dark violet paint. In this case, it's Hexen Lichen from Vallejo Game Air. I apply it exclusively to the shadows of the gold, avoiding the midtones and of course the brightest highlights. I use this airbrush paint because it is very similar to inks in terms of its saturation and satin finish, 2 characteristics that will add even more contrast to the figure. First, I create a complementary color contrast between the violet and the yellow predominant in the gold highlights, and then an uncommon contrast in the world of miniatures. The contrast between the matte of the highlights and the satin of the shadows. This type of contrast may not be very noticeable in video or photography, but in person, it achieves an impressive depth. Alright, in the next episode, I'll continue this series of videos by explaining how to paint the face of this Space Marine. Some of you might miss the Marine's sword, but don't worry, its tutorial will wrap up this series in the 4th episode. If you like what you've seen and want to support my channel, consider making a small contribution through Patreon, or joining as a channel member, and turning on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you in the next episode.